Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our June general UNTP information session. We are still in the middle of the open public review of the UNTP, so this will concern us today again, among other topics. Just give everyone a few more minutes to get in. We have 15 attendees by now. Yeah, so let's get started with the agenda slide. So we have, as I said, prepared for you a review of where we stand, or an update on where we stand with the public review. Then I'll have a short call to participate in our adoption-related work, which is now getting more and more important as we move from developing the UNTP into implementation. Then we prepared a deep dive for you that Steve will guide you a little bit on the differences between the UNTP and industry data spaces as an other approach to data exchange across value chains. And finally, as always, we will have general questions and answers and a discussion of those questions that you may have. So maybe then straight over to you, Steve, for an update on where we stand with the public review.
Yeah, sure. So most of you have seen this summary sent by email anyway, but there are 44 issues raised so far during the public review. Some of them are multiple issues from one party. I think there's about maybe 20 different people and organizations that have given us some feedback with a reasonable spectrum around the world and across different organization types. So that's good. And I would say none of the feedback was you're doing this wrong. All of it was here's a suggestion to do it better, which was quite comforting. And there's a link there for you to look at the detailed tickets, but I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the 44 issues grouped in 11 themes. So the first one was there was a reasonable amount of feedback asking us to clarify the alignment, unsurprisingly, with ESPR and the EU battery regulation. There is already some of that there. Some of these feedback, by the way, some of them many of them are requests for new features, but some of them are asking for things that are actually already on the site. They just may be in a different place that the respondent didn't see, which maybe tells us to tidy up our organization a bit. But yeah, so ESPR and EU alignment is one thing, and the overall messaging we've been using that what seems to resonate well is that UNTP is an upstream feedstock for the downstream regulatory product passport. The next group of feedback was about strengthening the product conformity trust chain. So not just a conformity certificate, but also the relationship to the accreditation of the conformity assessment body, and algorithmically matching, is this certificate not only issued by someone who's accredited to issue that certificate, but is it about the same thing? You know, is the subject right? Because there is a tendency in product conformity to substitute conformity certificates that you receive for one product and just replay it with another. So it's about strengthening those relationships. There was a proposal too for a new credential type, a corporate record. So as you may know, we have a product passport now, which is product sustainability information, and a facility record, which is factory, farm, mine site, but nothing really that aggregates performance information at the corporate level. So that's been a specific request. That's quite interesting. Then there's some requests around defining a minimal sort of profile for low maturity and SME adoption. Again, we do have some of that there, but there's want a bit more clarity on it. Then there's some things about selective disclosure and confidentiality. We already do have some stuff on that, but what's lacking a little bit is the relationship to things like GDPR and sovereign data requirements and so on. So maybe we can tweak that a little bit. Next slide, the remaining issues. There was some feedback about maybe expanding the technical profiles, not just a particular technology for verifiable credentials, but a little more. And then a fairly tricky one about how to ensure very long-lived credentials. That has quite a lot of thorny dimensions to it. We do have a page on that on the site, but this ticket raises a few more concerns that are quite interesting. Then there was a feedback about the idea that there will be parties who want to provide data and evidence about, for example, worker rights at factories that are independent and not related to the supply chain actor themselves. For example, a worker voice platform in a country that is collecting, if you like, complaints from workers. How do they make their information discoverable in the same way, because they're unlikely to get the permission of the facility itself to make that discoverable, right? So there's an interesting dimension to all this there about social networks, sorry, not social networks in the Facebook sense, but communities and community feedback, and how that aggregates into supply chain performance information. There were some questions about traceability events and whether they're needed a little bit more completeness, particularly for the post-sale life cycle stages. Some stuff about core vocabulary and semantics, a little bit of techie stuff there, and related to that, a request to align the vocabulary a little more with some of the other established data models, which is on our to-do map before 1.0. And yeah, and there's some stuff about versioning and registry management. So overall, the feedback was, I think, really good quality stuff. People put decent effort into it, and we appreciate it. I expect we'll get another little bunch of a little flurry of feedback just before the closing date, and then we'll consolidate all this and work on it. That's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steve. And the public review is open still for the next 3 weeks until 13th of July. Just go over slide back, Emanuela. And just also to mention on the link that we will share with this presentation, you can actually in time see all the comments that are coming in as soon as we have translated or converted them into GitLab issues. So you can also participate in the discussion on those comments, how we accommodate them in the UNTP. That's then also the working groups will continue to have sessions, but this time now during the review dedicated to addressing the issues that relate to that particular working group. So everyone who submitted a comment is also very much invited to join the respective working groups and explain or further discuss the issues if you wish. So this is because we saw that the comments that we received meant a lot of effort actually by those who submitted them, and we are very grateful for that effort. Everyone submitting comments may also have an interest to continue engaging through our technical working groups on the respective issues on which you submitted a comment. So again, also from my side, a big thank you to everyone who submitted those comments, and we look forward to the next 3 weeks to receive more of them. Is there any particular question now on the public review, how to submit questions, or something we can clarify now? Otherwise, we can also leave those to the question and answers at the end of the session. So I see no hands raised. Then we maybe can get back to that also later when we have the open floor for everyone. Then next topic, just a quick reminder that because the public review also marks the end of the official development of the UNTP, there will always be continuous improvement and maintenance, of course, but as CFACT has set up this development process, the last stage is the review and then the adoption, and then that clearly means we haven't released 1.0 for UNTP and an implementable version. That then means we will shift our efforts increasingly to adoption and implementation. That means also that the adoption working group becomes more and more important, and it becomes more and more important to have more experts and people joining to support us in this effort. And we are suggesting to have 3 additional groups that are related to adoption that we are going to set up gradually now in the next weeks. Communication is already operational and led by my colleague Emanuela Bade, who is in the UNECE Secretariat. That communication group is dealing with the UNTP website. It's dealing with social media issues, explainer videos. As you know, the first one that Steve prepared and presented in the last meeting. Presentation support, but very importantly also case studies, so real evidence stories of how UNTP adds value to supply chain actors, impact stories, complement that, and many more things related to communication. Then we have the community activation program support. You may recall from earlier meetings that we consider community activation programs as the place where membership-based organizations, be it standard schemes, industry associations, multi-stakeholder initiatives, who have an interest in supporting adoption of the UNTP, can form a community activation program, so to activate their communities, in this case their members, to adopt and implement the UNTP. And that is a format that, of course, particularly at the beginning, needs support. We will develop guidance for implementers. So, for example, how a sustainability standard scheme can move from paper-based to digital in the way it presents its conformity vocabularies, its conformity credentials, but also training materials for all groups of implementers, webinars, complementing that community activation program, and sector forum websites are about to be set up, and test services will then also be offered and developed so that anyone who has an implementation of the UNTP can test them before we will register them and make them an officially acknowledged part of UNTP. That's then also attested full interoperability with the core UNTP. And last but not least, a group we consider, which already started work, or some experts have already gathered under the adoption working group to work on impact, particularly on our impact assessment framework. The idea here is to measure and monitor and also communicate the broader impact that UNTP has beyond the immediate value proposition it delivers to individual companies. So that's all the cases where UNTP can help provide market access to high value markets for producers on the upstream of global value chains, export finance, all kinds of let's say economic wide interests where UNTP adds value. And that is what we want to spell out. This group should also look into formulating individual case studies that could also turn into funding proposals to international development agencies, where the UNTP can be part of an approach to, for example, enhance integration of suppliers into global value chains that have high expectations on the sustainability of their production. Fundraising support beyond those case study formulations is part of that group. Outreach activities, so talking or building relationship with important organizations in the standard setting space, in the sustainability standard space, in the accreditation or conformity space, so that we develop partnerships and mutual recognition of the UNTP and their respective frameworks, so that we can communicate to users of the UNTP how the UNTP is aligned with other standards and efforts. So everyone who has interest in joining one of those groups can express its interest to my colleague Emanuela Bade. Her email address is here, but also you can address it to me or Steve or everyone you know, and then we will channel that. And of course, working closely with Michael, who is our adoption working group lead. And since these 3 groups relate to adoption, he will have an oversight of now establishing them. We most importantly, we still look for leaders of the CAP support and impact and uptake group. So if any one of you has an interest to lead those groups, that's actually the next important step we need to take. And then these groups should become fully operational and exist side by side the other technical working groups we already have. So thank you very much for your attention to this point, and I'm heading back to Steve for one technical deep dive that we have prepared for you today, also owing a little bit to our participation in the DPP for EU conference in early June in Brussels, where we learned a lot about different approaches to data sharing across value chains, and very prominently, particularly in Europe, of course, the idea of industry data spaces, which is an approach not in conflict, but certainly complementary to UNTP. And since we have seen many questions on how UNTP and data spaces differ and also how they can usefully complement each other, we have prepared this deep dive. So over to you, Steve, for that agenda item.
Okay, thank you, Matthias. I don't know, deep dive is the word. It's a fairly high level comparison. I just want to really convey a few key ideas. I'm not sure whether people on the call are familiar with a thing called the data space, as defined mostly by some European groups, especially Industry 4.0 in Germany. But basically, it's a federated network of organizations that want to share industrial data between them. That's what a data space is. And, you know, conceptually, it can be used for DPP exchange. And so questions arise like, well, what's the difference between data spaces and UNTP, and why should they use one or the other? So these few slides are just trying to kind of position these two things, and so you can see how they complement each other. So for the most, sorry, go back to the previous slide. This one is basically giving the helicopter picture, which it says a data space is really it's a member club, right? You join a data space, you prove your identity, you enroll, you install a data space connector to your IT system, and you start arranging bilateral contracts for mostly private data. The organization A and B agree to exchange such and such a data in a secure connection between them. So that's an example of it, the little blue bubble there. UNTP, on the other hand, comes from a different perspective, which is it's more open and decentralized. There's no sort of registration. You kind of bring your own identity with you, whether that's a national business register identity or some other identity. And the data is mostly public, not entirely. There is the ability to have confidential information, but that's really a key difference. Mostly private, member club, join the club, establish bilateral contracts, versus open world, bring your own identifier, publish data, make it discoverable by anyone, and sometimes make it selectively available. It's really the different concepts. So you see there that little diagram, the green blobs are, you know, anybody in the world, and the blue space is a bunch of companies in a data space. Next slide is sort of a slightly different picture of the same thing, right? In the data space world, two organizations have IT systems, and they connect their IT systems, and they share usually private data. Whereas in the UNTP world, data is discoverable, for example, in this case, by a barcode on a box that resolves to something like perhaps a public product passport or conformity certificate. And importantly, it's both human and machine readable, so there's no dependency on connecting IT systems. A machine can read it or a human can read it, doesn't matter. So again, that's just a slightly different analogy. You might use data spaces for exchanging like commercially sensitive information like invoices and shipping documents, or perhaps engineering design information, whereas UNTP is more about driving transparency, which by definition is more public. Next slide. So again, data spaces mostly private, but public at the edges could be. Who joins? Members of a club versus anyone bringing their own identity. Data spaces digital only, run software connectors, and UNTP is human and machine readable. Access control is done rather differently, right? So in a data space, you kind of, explicitly which organization you're granting access to your data to, whereas in UNTP, you have where there is confidential access, the pattern is more, I'm not sure exactly who the person is that wants my data, but I'm convinced they've got the authorized role to get it. So for example, the provider of perhaps some sensitive information around a product needs to be able to be confident that the requester, even though they don't previously know them, has legitimate right to that information. So in the UNTP world, you'd present a credential saying, here's proof I am a market surveillance authority, or here's proof I am a recycling shop, or here's proof I am the legitimate purchaser of the goods because I found a secret key inside the box. That's the UNTP model, whereas the data space model is, I'm granting you particular party access because I know you. And so, UNTP is kind of a much broader, more decentralized, more loosely coupled approach. And last slide. This is more about, well, okay, they're different, but how do they work together? There has been some discussion already about a bridge between a private data space or a federated data space and the rest of the world. So I've drawn little pictures of bridges there, and the idea is that organizations sharing private data inside a data space may want to make some of that data publicly accessible. For example, a product passport. Well, they can publish that at the edge of their data space and make it discoverable in just the same way that any single organization would do that. And similarly, organizations inside a data space might want to reach outside the data space and pull in public information, right, that they discover in the decentralized architecture of UNTP. So each data space can have a little bridge between the internal federated world and the external decentralized world. So in one sense, a data space is almost like one of those green dots. It's just a larger community, right? But it's got a boundary. Every data space has a boundary. And the question then is, well, how do you cross that boundary? Because some of the parties I'm interested to collaborate with are not in my data space. And the answer there is, well, you could use UNTP to issue data to and receive data from parties outside of your data space. That's basically the high-level positioning of how these work together. I see them as complementary, not competitive, and adding value to each other. So when you've got sensitive data to exchange, okay, use a data space. But when you want to reach outside your boundary, and they all have boundaries, and every supply chain crosses those boundaries, so UNTP can help there. Hope that makes sense. I kept it reasonably high level. There's a lot more details in there about, asset administration shell versus linked data and all these sort of questions, which we can delve into if anyone wants to. I think that's the last slide, isn't it, on data spaces?
Yes, thank you so much, Steve.
Yeah.
That was, I think, helpful and at least for our European participants, an important topic indeed to discuss. So the second half hour of this meeting belongs to you. You can ask your questions to any of the topics we just discussed, but also anything else about the UNTP or the public review, or also announcements of work you are doing that relates to our work. So please don't be shy and use this opportunity to exchange with us, but also among yourselves. Just raise your hand, then we have an easier time to identify you and give you the floor. Yes, Susanne.
Yeah, to break the ice a little bit. Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to share that also for UNTP or for credentials in general, especially for digital product passports, there is the idea that you can manage the access to that data also with your identity. You mentioned it shortly, Steve, but I just wanted to clarify that with UNTP, of course, you can also publish data and or give access control to data that you publish in the way UNTP data is published as a verifiable credential. And then you can make it public by checking the identity or the role of that identity. For example, does this identity, is it a market surveillance authority, or is it a company with a certain business activity? And then you can share that data with someone. So I believe that you're right. This is probably why you said it's mostly public UNTP, but you can in the same way also make data available that is not available for the public, but only for certain roles that you identify with their digital identity.
Thank you, Susanne. That's an important clarification. Yes. Yes, Adriana.
Oh, we might have a short meeting. Ah.
Yeah, no, we have another hand.
Yeah. I thought you'd miss me for a moment. I brought this up recently in the meeting, the supply chain meeting with Steve before the meeting got underway. But I was wondering whether anybody in the discussion in today's group have thought about, it's not so new anymore. It was in April where Chinese issued Decree 834 and 835 and the implications that may have for UNTP.
That's a great question, Adriana. And we did have a bit of a discussion about this in the supply chain working group. So for those that aren't aware, the Chinese government has issued a decree that sensitive supply chain information, and they group information into kind of, this can be public, this can be shared if you ask us, namely ask the government, and this can never be shared. Right? And generally it's about protecting an end-to-end supply chain confidentiality, right? China's spent quite a bit of time building end-to-end supply chain capability, right? And the demand from consumers to say, give me transparency, runs counter to the strategic advantage that you have when you've built an end-to-end supply chain, right? So we got this kind of conflict of law and ambitions between the EU wanting transparent information about products and China saying, yeah, but I don't want to tell you that because I've spent decades building high integrity supply chains or end-to-end supply chains. And actually, I would say that conflict of law is really just a macro manifestation of something that we encounter every day at the micro level, which is a given facility, let's say, a battery manufacturer or something like that. Except in a few industries where there's a long history of regulated traceability, like food and food safety, most of them, never mind the law, actually refuse to share their upstream information anyway because it's considered commercially sensitive, right? So telling a downstream buyer exactly where you got all the components from in terms of your upstream supply for this product is something that a lot of manufacturers will not want to share. So there's this micro pattern, which is driven by commercial sensitivities, and this macro pattern, which is driven by geopolitical concerns. And this is really a challenge, right, for transparent supply chains. I note that there has been some communication from the European Commission to say, well, most of the data points in a DPP, an EU DPP, fall into that first category, and maybe one or two the second category, which is either public and you can share it, or it probably is if you ask us, that sort of category. But, and so that's painted as a kind of, it's all right then, everything will be fine. But the trouble is the EU DPP, and any DPP for that matter, is a set of claims about performance. And if you want to validate and test whether those claims are true, then you need evidence. And that evidence certainly falls into the second and third bucket of sensitivity, right? So whilst it might be true, you can put a fact in a passport like carbon emissions is XYZ, the Chinese law will preclude Chinese companies from sharing all the evidence behind that, the upstream supply and the intensities, right? So this is, I think, an interesting challenge. But like I said, it's not really any different to the fine-grained commercial sensitivities that most manufacturers have. And the discussion that we're having about how to mitigate that is largely to say, well, you can't change the law, and you're probably not going to convince factories to share information they don't want to. So what we really need to do is instrument these factories so that verifiable data comes in, is constructed there and comes out, and basically independent but mutually trusted parties have access to the sensitive data and assert that, yes, I've looked at the inputs and outputs of this factory. They're not doing mass balance fraud. The carbon intensity really is this. You can trust it. So says an independent third party. I suspect this is the only scalable way forward, because these conflicts of laws and commercial sensitivities are going to constantly eat our lunch. If
but there's
it was a bit of work on that. Yeah.
So you've given a great explanation, Steve, and thanks for that. But do you think that some Chinese companies who value their trade with the EU will, because as is usual for North Asian countries, Korea, Japan, and China, the language of the law is quite up to interpretation rather than what we are familiar with in English common law or even Napoleonic law. And that's an important little thing to note, which means that a Chinese company may say, I value my trade with the EU, so therefore I want to comply. But the Chinese government institutionalizing that or deciding which companies are sensitive or part of under national security, because that's a justification that they're saying. And so that puts that trade at risk. It may even come under WTO. It might even become a case under WTO. Long shot, but you never know. So it's not like the first example where some companies will decide within UNTP outside of China, I'm not going to release that information, and some companies will. In China, their choice may be taken away from them. Regardless, we don't know that yet. We don't know how that's going to play out in the coming months and perhaps the next couple of years. But it will be an interesting issue to watch if Chinese companies say we want to comply with EU regulation, which puts us in conflict with our own domestic law.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have an answer here. I'm just really bringing up the different points that will arise.
Sure. Look, I mean, every country makes laws as they see fit, and it won't surprise me if China's not the last to make such laws. So every company will have to work within the law, right? And I think that will mean less access to evidence. I say again, though, it's typically what's sensitive is the evidence behind claims, not the claim itself, right? And EU regulation says, oh, you have to do sufficient due diligence, and it's a bit vague what that means, and you have to report the facts, right? So really, it's putting the onus on the EU economic operator to go, how have I done enough due diligence? When I asked my supplier, and the supplier said, well, I can't because, I'm not allowed to. I think we'll see, we will see a quick emergence of third parties who solve this problem. I've already had 2 companies reach out to me who've seen UNTP, one from the US and one from China, saying, oh, we've got a platform for this automated algorithmic assessment of facilities that can take all the data and make an independent, trustworthy assessment of it and meet the intent of the European requirement while satisfying the Chinese law, right? So innovation happens, and I suspect this will continue apace, but it's kind of above our pay grade to, you know, we just got to work within it, not kind of argue its existence, I suppose.
Okay, I have very good unauthorized translations of those 2 laws, so I'll put them onto the Slack channel if anybody's interested in there is a group in China who does translations on a crowd translating team who do very, very good translations. So I have my translations from them. So I will, if anybody's interested, I will put them on the Slack channel, and you can have a look yourself.
Yeah, thank you both. That's indeed a relevant question, and also relevant to mention that we are working on a UNECE recommendation number 51, which is actually dedicated to the question of how legal conflict can limit data exchange across jurisdictions. So in other words, the problem of legal or regulatory interoperability. And we discussed that topic at the example of critical energy or critical minerals and the mining sector. So this is a recommendation that we have now started to work on. Those who are on the Gaggle UNTP mailing list, but also on the CFAC mailing list, will soon receive a call for participation in that effort. So this may be an interesting work stream that complements the work we do on technical and semantic interoperability through the technical work on the UNTP. So everyone who's interested in that, just wait for this call for participation to arrive, and then you're welcome to engage. Yes, Irene.
Yeah, thank you. As OpenSUP Hub, we are currently gathering feedback from the whole team, and we'll submit it to the GitHub in one consolidated, you know, not in one ticket, but of course, but multiple tickets, but at one time. So my first question is, as a working group participant, once the public review closes on July 13th, can we still raise GitHub issues for potential version 1 improvements, or is that the final cutoff for comments to be considered in this version?
Well, as you know, we've been working in public for, what, 2 years now, and there are something like, I don't know, 300 issues raised over that time. So the public review is really just a formal window over the informal process that's been going on for 2 years already. So I think my answer to you is, in the formal window, when someone submits something in the context of that formal window, we're obliged to address it, right? And it might be that we say, no, that's a bad idea, or it might be that we accept it and implement it, or something in between, but we're obliged to address it. If something comes in after the July 13th, we would treat it like every other ticket that's ever been raised, which is, it's a thought, it goes in a backlog, we discuss it. Maybe it's a brilliant idea and we go, yeah, we really think we ought to get this in before 1.0, or maybe we go, yeah, it's a later release, or, you know, but so the answer is, yeah, you can raise tickets anytime. It's really just the obligation on us to deal with them changes.
Okay, thank you. And actually, I have another question. Community activation program is very interesting for us. Is this program meant for organizations like us, like OpenSUP Hub, to help bring our, for example, faculty members into the UNTP ecosystem and train them? Or is it designed more for broader community, not just our community, but broader community activation and shared training across a wider group?
No, it's actually exactly as you say. It's meant for organizations like yours who have a community because they have members and who have control over those communities and therefore can interact with them quite efficiently. If issues come up which cross community boundaries or which may affect an entire sector or which are really systemic issues for a sector, for that we have our sector stakeholder fora, which is actually the place where all community activation programs can meet and can exchange things that are of relevance beyond an individual community activation program. These programs have the idea that because there are multiple organizations interested in the UNTP, we just give them this opportunity or this vehicle to promote the UNTP among their members, and there may also be overlaps in the way they do that because some of their members may be members of other organizations who run a similar program, but that's all okay. Just that we thought that this type of program is the right way to, in a decentral way, let everyone engage in implementing the UNTP. And the way to engage is the main two avenues is either you are contributing to the implementation of the UNTP, meaning you are really issuing digital conformity credentials if you are a standard scheme, or you, in your case, contribute to specifications for facility identifiers. That will then be implementations coming out of the community activation programs, or you simply help in the advocacy because you may have members that are multipliers in certain circles on the political level or elsewhere, and that's also an important role that community activation programs can play.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So if you're interested, should we outreach to Michael or Emanuela, as you shared in the slide?
Both, as you wish. We are hopefully, if we have a person fully responsible also for the community activation support, then that may be the focal point. But for now, you can reach out to everyone. We are soon setting up a website for each of the sectors we work in for the sector fora, and under these sector fora, we will then also host sub-sites for each community activation program. So that can then be populated by the those who are interested in running such a program or who run such a program. So this will be gradually now rolled out. So stay tuned, and we also use this meeting to keep you updated.
Okay, thank you very much. It's clear. Thank you.
Well, we have no problem giving everyone 15 minutes of their time back for other important work. So let's just wait a moment if anyone still wants to raise his hand. Otherwise, I think we can close the meeting and wish you all a nice day or evening wherever you are. Okay, I see support for closing, and then thank you very much, everyone. And we will share the presentation, so you can also get back to what we just presented. And then we hope to see you all back next time in July, when we have our July meeting, last Thursday of July. Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.